Welcome to a Matter of Time podcast. The intent of this podcast is to educate allied health professionals, parents, and the public about tools and strategies which support development, rehabilitation, and general health. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to have you with us again on A Matter of Time. Today, we're flipping the script a little bit, and my colleague and friend, Amy Vega, who is clinical support and research support for Interactive Metronome, lots of different things that she does. She's going to be interviewing me about the use of I Am Home with different kinds of clients and how we implement it actually within the home. So, Amy, welcome to today's podcast.
Thank you. And thank you for letting me interview you today.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So I figured I would talk to you since you live in this world and use this regularly with your clients and see how helpful it is to them. So I just wanted to start out and ask you, why did you become an OT? What got
Oh,
you
wow.
interested in that?
That's a great question. So I blame my parents. I tell them all the time it's their fault that I do what I do, which is a great way for them to know that they really were instrumental in me going into this field. My mother and father were both teachers. My mom started work in the early intervention program in Colorado back in the 80s, and she got her master's degree and was very instrumental in autism task forces and different things around the state. And I got to know her and her colleague. And in high school, I would work with them, whenever they needed an extra hand. And they instilled in me that occupational therapy was the perfect field for me to go into. And so, the stars aligned and I was able to get into occupational therapy and graduate in the early 90s, which dates me. I say I'm seasoned, right? I'm not old, I'm seasoned. And from there, I've just loved every minute of learning and exploring this field.
Wow, that's amazing. It's amazing that you nailed it from the get-go. Some people, it takes a while to figure out what their calling is and what they're going to really enjoy doing in life. So that's awesome. You have a couple of locations in Colorado. You have a private practice. Can you tell me about that?
Sure, I'd love to. So early on, I worked at the Easter Seals Foundation, and this is kind of the history of how I got to where I am today. Did some contract work with schools and independent work, and then raised my 4 children, which in and of itself is an entire job of developmental learning and processes. And I learned so much. And during that time, I took on some part-time positions in pediatric locations. And about 8 years ago, I decided that going back to the Western Slope where I grew up, which is a very depressed socioeconomic area of Colorado, was something that I wanted to do kind of on the tail end of the work that I had been doing in my career. And we started with one very small clinic in Gunnison, Colorado, which is by Crested Butte, the ski area. And we started in a 750 square foot little space and with speech therapy, occupational therapy, and grew that into about a 2,500 square foot space, and then opened a second location about 2 years later. And we are I'm so thankful that we are doing what we're doing. After I planted the first clinic, the Western Slope has really grown to offer multiple services for special needs children. And I've never been competitive outside of this business. I'm a very competitive person otherwise, but to say that we're the only game in town, we want to work with the community and schools. And I think that's been really important in small rural areas because there is a lot of need and there's only, one of us, right? And so we have to be willing to be, humble and give grace and say there's another practitioner, there's another clinic that might work better for you. And, everyone wins in the end. So so it's been a great ride. It's exhausting and a lot of hard work, but it's good.
So you have 2 centers. You have one in Gunnison, and where's the other one located?
Delta, Colorado, which is about an hour and a half away from Gunnison, but over a mountain pass and over by the Telluride ski area, that vicinity between Telluride and Powderhorn. There's ski areas all over. But our Delta location is a very different service than our Gunnison location. So it's fascinating. And I toggle back and forth between the two. And we now offer speech, occupational therapy, and physical therapy. And it's just, yeah, it's wonderful.
So you've been an interactive metronome provider for several years, and you've been an instructor for interactive metronome. How many years
Mhm.
is it now that you have been doing this in your practice?
I want to say 15, about 15
Mhm.
years. I was working at a private clinic on the Front Range of Colorado, Colorado Springs, and finding that the kids that we were working with had another occupational therapist that was a partner of mine, and we just weren't seeing results. We weren't seeing that goals were changing. And if they were changing, the margins were not very big. And so I went on a quest, if you will, to find tools and modalities that would help these kids find success themselves, work hard, right? Change the brain. What I found is that as occupational therapists during that time, we were really working on a lot of splinter skills. So we could get a child to write their name, but they couldn't copy a sentence. So that's what I would call a splinter skill. Understanding the flow of handwriting wasn't coming through. And so it wasn't applicable in different settings. And one of the tools that stood out because of the research and because of the case studies that I read was interactive metronome. My business partner and I, Heather Watt, who also has taught for interactive metronome, she's a wonderful OT. We purchased the equipment sight unseen. The two of us did the self-study course way back in the early 2000s, and I guess it would have been about 2010. And we started working with athletes and the kids in the clinics right away, seeing progress that we had not seen in our careers over 20 years.
It's such a powerful tool. I always
Yeah.
tell people when they ask me about it, I say just try it.
Mhm.
Once you use it, you'll never go back to practicing the same way again.
Right. And I think the key there was that we dove in and understood that the learning of this equipment was on us. And so each of us started by diving into that self study. And then we applied that knowledge to our own children. We had that opportunity to work with kids that, we knew and lived in our home. And then after we were very comfortable with using it, we applied it to the special needs population, the neurodivergent population. And Colorado Springs is a very transient community because it has a lot of military bases all over. I think you've visited once or twice, Amy. And what we were finding is that there were times that we would get a child, and within 3 months, that child would be moving because the family was being transferred. And so when you look at offering therapy to a child who is going through developmental processes and needing intervention, and you only have 3, 6, 9 months, that is not a lot of time to affect change. In fact, in the school system, they'd say, yeah, you're just going to have to wait till next year and get a new IEP. The schools are doing all they can with what they have, but we were finding that it just wasn't enough. And so we started an intensive program where we were offering interactive metronome 3 times a week for 6 weeks. So we were getting 18 sessions in. And then families who were moving that wanted to continue with that then would either purchase families would purchase what we call the I Am Home. Let me show this to you. This is an accessory tool to what we use in the clinics, which is just same concept, just a bigger box. And we as therapists in the clinic setting, then we can use the interactive metronome with a variety of clients. There's no limitations on it. With the I Am Home, because of licensing, it is licensed to one family. And that gives the family the opportunity to still work with me because I can set them up and virtually they can access all of the training. And now with Zoom and, after our COVID pandemic, the nature of healthcare delivery has changed. It's shifted,
Yeah.
right? And so that's much more acceptable to use a program like this with a family that maybe does not have access to a provider an
Mhm.
occupational speech, physical therapist, educator, chiropractor, they're all over, right? But we all know that military bases aren't exactly convenient. And so if you're in the middle of Kentucky and you don't have access to a provider that can work with you one-on-one, the I Am Home is such a great tool with paired with, a Zoom or a Google Meet or FaceTime where we can still interact.
I guess there's some of your clients that might still see you in the clinic and do
Mhm.
some I am home at home. I guess would allow you to work on other things with them when you're seeing them in person. Another thing that I'm thinking is that you have some clients, like you said, that are just not close to a clinic. They're in the middle of nowhere, and this is the only access that they would have. So do you find in your practice, do you find there's a combination of those types of clients where some of them are doing I am home at home, maybe even some I am in the clinic with you and other things in the clinic, and then you've got some that are just completely remote?
Yes, actually, in the past, I've had clients that have done that. Right now, what I'm finding is that if a client can get to me and I can get them into the clinic to get them started on IM, but maybe due to insurance or travel or location, they don't have the means to come to the clinic each week. They might opt to just go with the I Am Home. In our economy right now, I don't have to tell you that everything is expensive. Gas,
Yeah.
food, everything is expensive. What I find really wonderful is that I Am Home pricing has not changed since the launch of it. The pricing remains the same, which is wonderful. And when I, as a practitioner, am going to use I Am Home with a client, I absolutely want them to understand what we're doing. So seeing them in the clinic is a great option. When they are using the I Am Home, then privately, I can still see what they're doing, and it's a
Mhm.
much less, the cost is less. So we have some clients that travel 1 hour each way to our clinic. And if they can come in even once a month and get a one-on-one session, and in between use the I Am Home,
Yeah.
we're saving them, at least $20 each way in gas. So if you look at that, that's a big expense. And not to mention the time expense.
Mhm.
Kids are in school, school hours have lengthened. Kids are going to school. I have 5-year-olds that have to be at school at 7:30 a.m. and they are not out of school until 3:30 p.m. That is a long, exhausting day
Yeah.
for a 5-year-old. And if you are older and you participate in extracurricular activities, you're looking at another 2 to 3 hours to fit in a visit one way to an occupational speech or physical therapist that says, hey, we're going to do IM today. Those kids are exhausted. Parents are working 10 hours a day minimum just to meet ends meet. What I'm trying to do in this culture right now is offer something that would take that financial pressure off of the clients that I'm working with and can go into this a little bit more, but one of the ways that I do that is because telehealth is now an accepted practice, where 10 years ago you had to get approval and oftentimes it wasn't accepted. I can now bill insurance for the time that I am spending with these clients through a Zoom call or Google Meet while they're using the I Am Home. That is considered a visit. And so direct service delivery used to be one-on-one in the clinic. And I love that delivery, service type, because you build relationships and, there's warmth and we
Yeah.
can really be with one another. And as humans, we need that. But if
Mhm.
it's not possible, this is a nice secondary option. And in the areas that we work in, we do have a combination of state-sponsored healthcare, Medicaid, and private insurance. We are able to bill either one for the I Am Home sessions, whereas even 6 years ago, what I was having to do is charge each family cash for the sessions that they were doing. And so, what a wonderful time to be in healthcare where now I can offer these families, the option to work with me, still do interactive metronome, and not have to worry about a huge, payout of cash in order to
Right.
access this technology.
Right. So one of the things that we know from the research that's been done and just through lots of clinical experience, with a wide variety of people, different ages and things, is the importance of repetition.
Mhm.
Repetition is very important. So sometimes I've always felt like in our clinic sessions, we're so limited with our time that we have with each person. And, there's a little bit of time spent catching up, how are things going this week? And what are the issues of the week that you're dealing with? And there's a relationship there too. So it's not like you can just say, we're not doing that. We got to do this. I am over here. So there's just limited time sometimes in those face-to-face sessions to be able to do all that you want to accomplish. So how do you find that the interactive metronome, I should say that I am home, doing it at home, how does that improve the amount of repetition that they're doing?
Right, the neuroplasticity and the
Yeah.
change of those neural pathways. So let me tell you first, let's clarify what a repetition is. This is called a trigger, a button trigger. And when I activate this trigger, it sends my timing of activation of this trigger to my I am home unit. So I hear a cue, I hear a bell in my ear, and the idea is to clap with that bell. Okay, so every time I clap with that bell, I am clapping for a repetition. So 1 repetition, 2 repetitions, 3 repetitions. What we know, as you mentioned from research, is that it does take a high amount of repetitions to create that neuroprocessing change that we're looking for. The temporal lobe, the frontal temporal lobe area, the executive processing, the auditory processing. We want all of that to be firing together. And what we also know about these repetitions is that when I react to a bell, I need to react within a certain millisecond range, not second. And so if you've ever been to an elementary school choral concert, you'll see kids moving to the beat of the music, and then you'll see other kids that are moving that aren't on the beat, right? And it's just fascinating to me. It's fascinating to watch, and it's so cute, and I love it. But those kids that don't naturally have that timing, we have found through research that those are the children that need more academic support in school. And so repetition is important, but also that concept of how close am I to that bell? I'm clapping with it. I'm dancing with the music. I'm not dancing to music in my own head, right? So I want to be on the beat, but that's not good enough. What we know is that we have to be reacting with this trigger within a certain millisecond range consistently, right? In order to affect change in the brain, which is the goal. So I'm looking with my client to achieve 18,000 to 25,000 repetitions minimum. And when I say that, that's kind of a broad, right? That's 6,000 repetitions between 18,000 and that's 7,000 repetitions, 18,000 and 25,000. Well, the reason I have that broad range is because some of my clients come in and they have pretty good timing to start with. Others need a little more work, right, to even understand what they're going to be doing with this program, which is simply bonding with a motor movement to an auditory cue. And that's the simplest way to explain what this is. As we learn to do that, then we learn to listen to additional cues that tell us if we're too early on that beat or too late, which helps our brain in real time make a change with our motor plan. So if you think about working with someone in a clinic and you ask them to do something and they do it incorrectly, you have to give them feedback after that task has passed. You are not able to give them feedback in real time. So let's say, Amy, as an occupational therapist, I'm asking a child to get on a scooter on their tummy and kind of swim across the room. Well, maybe this child is having a hard time swimming reciprocally. So they're maybe only pulling with one arm. Well, I don't know they're going to do that until after the motor plan has passed. And so the feedback that I can give that child after. In interactive metronome, in the use of interactive metronome, there are other cues that come to your auditory system, your brain, in real time. And those can be visual or auditory. And the research has shown us that there is the key. When I can alter a motor plan in real time and go, I'm too fast. I need to slow down on that next hit. Now my brain is processing in real time and we are on our way to making change.
Yeah, that's so important that you brought that up. And, those key areas of motor planning, you have to have a cognitive component. You have to be really thinking about your motor skills. You have to think about what's happening and learning. And you have to have that feedback. The feedback is something that I think as humans, it's really hard to catch it right in the moment, like you said, because these neurons in our brain are communicating with our body in milliseconds for these motor skills to happen. And we're catching it right at that millisecond level with interactive metronome and giving them feedback right at that millisecond level, which is a really nice leveraging of technology, I think, to really get in there in that space where humans just kind of, we can't do that. We can't process at that level and in real time and give feedback like that. This makes me think about when you talk about the number of repetitions that you're wanting your clients to accomplish. How many sessions does that end up being typically? How long are they typically doing this before you see results?
Let's take an average client. And what I like to build up to is 1,000 reps per session. So if we look at a couple of practice sessions where we're just getting the groove and we're really getting to understand, I clap with the beat, and then we start to improve our timing. At that point, I call those, countable repetitions, right? So those are repetitions I can count because the client is now adjusting to learn how their motor plan needs to be changed. They need to speed up. They need to slow down, right? And so I tell my clients it's going to be a minimum of 18 sessions and it might be up to 30. Also depends on what the endurance of the client would be. Ideally, I would love to get 20 to 30 minutes a session out of each of my clients, but ideal is not our world, right? I work in the neurodivergent pediatric population. And so sometimes it takes us about 5 to 6 sessions to even work up to 15 minutes. Okay. And then we're working from 15 minutes up to 30. Here's the caveat with that. As the occupational therapist, as the practitioner, the person that is setting up the training, I can set up the training to have more repetitions or less repetitions based upon the tempo of that auditory cue. So if I've got a kiddo that is always moving and they are Speedy Gonzalez, right? They are Bugs Bunny. They're constantly going then they might need a faster tempo. Well, that's going to give us more repetitions in, we might go from 60 repetitions in 1 minute to 80 repetitions in a minute. And if we're looking at that across 10 minutes, now we've gone from 600 repetitions to 800. 20 minutes would be 1,200 to 1,600 repetitions. See how easy it can be to actually achieve 1,000 repetitions in a session. But again, it depends upon the individual and what they need and what they respond best to. Personally, I know that the research, for the most part, has been done with a tempo of 54 beats a minute. But in my own use of this technology, I have trained individuals at 70 beats a minute, 80 beats a minute, and I have seen the same outcomes. So it's hard to understand because you're responding to a beat a lot quicker than 1 beat a second, but it's still measuring in milliseconds how quickly you respond to that beat if you are at 80 beats a minute. Okay, so, and these are all the things that you mentioned this, you really have to get on and you have to experience this technology. And so if I have parents whose eyes gloss over when I start talking about all this, what I'll do is I'll put them on the equipment for maybe a quick 2-minute example, and that light goes on and they're like, oh, I get it. This is hard. This is hard. Yes, it's hard. It's hard work. your brain's purpose is movement and response. So if we start with movement that would not help brain change as a whole, I'm going to go back to that idea of splinter skills. I just am a huge proponent of let's start in the brain. I know it looks like you're just clapping, but the outcomes that I see, we have kids who independently potty train, their sleep patterns normalize, their self-regulation. We're talking about behavioral regulation and sensory integration. They start to normalize because what we've done, gotten into that brain's response timing system. And the brain is now not taking detours around these hard things. I want to respond when someone steps on my toe at school. Now I can go, oh, someone stepped on my toe. That hurt. I need to move away from that student instead of pushing that student out of the way. And you start to see this anywhere from, I don't know, again, everyone is different, but I've seen it within 6 weeks, all the way up to 6 months before we start to see some of that change. And can't answer why, but I've never had a client that I've used this with that hasn't had some sort of positive change. And I really can't say that about any other technology that I've used.
I do clinical support for Interactive Metronome, and I often get inquiries from people, would it help with this? Would it help with that? It's so powerful and so helpful that you begin to start thinking outside of the box. Like, for example, you mentioned about sleep patterns. People are always looking for what can I offer this person to help them? We definitely need more research in some areas, but research is really, in my opinion, very far behind the clinical application. In reality, we really kind of know something works before we actually end up getting a research study that validates it. But as you were talking, I was thinking about that interactive metronome and the IM home are definitely not a one size fits all. Can you tell me more about, the other ways that you modify settings? Because there's so many different settings that can be adjusted so that the individual is comfortable. And the other thing I'm thinking about asking you as you're talking is, how do the kids like it compared
Oh,
to other
great.
things that
Yeah,
they do?
great
Yeah.
question. Well, okay, let's start with fit. There are definitely families that are not a good fit for this. That would be families that can barely get the homework done at night,
Yeah.
or they're so busy, and they just really have not found a way to make the time for this. And so I have sold interactive metronome home units to families that never follow through, and that hurts my heart, because I'm like, that would be so great. But here's the other thing: it doesn't expire. So once you purchase the unit, maybe this season of your life isn't perfect for this, or you just can't get it done. But maybe in a year, when some things have changed, it is a good season. There is no expiration date on the IM home. And so I remind my clients that frequently, like, there's no shame in this. We all have life experiences that
Yeah.
happen outside of our control. People get sick, family members need us, accidents happen. And so it might not be a good fit today, but that doesn't mean it wouldn't be a good fit later. I find that the parents that are invested, that really want to know about this and that have read the case studies, they've gone on the Interactive Metronome website and they've listened and studied and said, you know what, I think this would be a good fit, and they're invested in it. Or adults, let's just say you have an elderly person getting out of a skilled care unit. What a great thing for them. The elderly, there's a lot going on, right? They sometimes have transportation issues. Maybe they shouldn't be driving. They're on fixed income. They can't make it to weekly scheduled sessions. So coming out of a acute rehab unit or a skilled care facility, this would be a great fit for them. But again, there has to be investment. And so let's talk about who loves it, who doesn't love it. It's work, Amy. You've done it. It can be frustrating. There are days it's frustrating. I was talking to a mom the other day about this, and the reality is, as humans, happens. Change doesn't happen if we don't work hard at it. We don't create a new movement pattern. I don't go run a marathon without a little bit of blood, sweat, and tears, right? But if I want to learn something new, there's going to be challenge and work. And I think that some of our clients think that this is just gaming. Now, there is gaming that we can add to this technology that helps with engagement. And we're finding that whether a client is playing a game on this technology or they're just using the technology, there really isn't a lot of difference with the outcomes. So what a great opportunity. But the games are there for engagement. It's still work. With that being said, I have a family that just purchased this a couple weeks ago, purchased the I Am Home. They are 5 hours away from me, and they couldn't find a provider. And so they reached out to me and said, hey, we homeschool and we've got 3 kids that we think this would be great with. So I sent them the unit. We had to wait to see if I could bill insurance. I can. So we're going to start training. But in the meantime, I just said, here's a couple of games to engage your kids just so they know what to do. Wow. I had to tell the family, I'm like, okay, that's enough practice. Let's not, continue to use it until we have baseline scores, because it's really important that I know where you start and where we're headed. They loved it. They loved it. Not every kid loves it. Not every adult loves it. It can be really a test to your own ability to stick to it, right? Because you have to be able to understand that in 1 session, there's not going to be change. In 2 sessions, there's not going to be change. Maybe 3, we're starting to see some change to the millisecond, but we might not see behavioral or motor planning change quite yet. And it is practice. An infant that is learning to walk is going to fall down thousands of times. They are going to fail. We don't get change without failure. Failure has to be part of the work that we put in. If we are perfect at everything, we wouldn't need therapists, we wouldn't need schools, we wouldn't need coaches, but we're not. And so when you approach this with the right mindset, there will be days that are hard. There will be days that I feel like I failed. However, if I don't go through that challenge, I'm not going to get the outcomes that I want. This doesn't have to be daily, okay? So we can do it 3 times a week with a day in between. We could do 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes at night. Maybe I have a sensory issue wearing headphones or even earbuds. Maybe I need a speaker system that I can work with this. Maybe this trigger right here doesn't feel great on my hand because I have sensory integration challenges with tactile and texture. So maybe I need to modify. That's where I step in as the practitioner to say, let's try this. Let's make it more comfortable for you. Let me change the training so there's a little more pleasant training with it. Maybe we need more games. And my philosophy as a practitioner is always been you end on a positive note. So the very last task of every session I have clients do might be the easiest one they do that week or that day for the session, but they're going to have success because that's what they remember. So that is so important that last task they do, they go, yes, I did it. They don't need to know that I have modified the feedback, that I, as the practitioner, have gone in and I have adjusted some of the settings, but that's the power of doing this, either virtually or in person, is I get to do that and I get to give that gift to whoever I'm working with, that gift of positive reinforcement. And then the next time they come on, they remember that.
Yeah. So one of the things that is really amazing is that this technology, there are so many treatments out there and things that purport to improve attention. Interactive metronome forces you to focus.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hard work because of that feedback that you're getting. You're not getting feedback at the very end. So you did the whole thing, and then now at the end, it's telling you, good job, or you could be a little bit better, or you know what, this is a rough day. Do get feedback at the end. You get your score at the end, but you're getting that feedback right exactly at that very moment that you processed and responded, right at that millisecond level. And I just think that that's such a powerful cue for focus. It's right in that real time, in that millisecond when that neuron is communicating from one side of the brain to the other, right there, that's where the feedback's happening. So it doesn't really let you get out of focusing. It makes
No.
you focus. Yeah. So that's part of the power of it. So we've talked about, how you can adjust settings and, the amount of time that they do the session and that kind of thing. And you referred to a training plan. Can you tell us more about the e-clinic? Because so this is a very important part of this, as far as setting up training plans and keeping track of your different clients that are doing I Am Home. So tell us more about the e-clinic.
And so this is just a test. This is something that I wrote to train my therapists in the clinic so that they understand the e-clinic. And basically what you're seeing as I move this screen is that I have loaded session into a user account. The user account is Grace for test, okay? And I've named it phases 1 through 6 for a girl. That just means I know when I'm writing the session who I'm focusing on. So let's take a look at session number 4. And what you see on session number 4 is that there are 9 tasks, and each task has individual settings on them. And I can go from task to task, and I can change the repetitions, the tempo, the screen. I can change the background screen. I can add in a game instead, or I can choose from any number of backgrounds. The other thing that I can do is I could load in a game which, could be soccer, it could be basketball, it could be baseball, it could be it could be football, or something with more fun, more animated, fishing games or a fairy tale game. And each of these games responds the same way it does when you are just trading with a clear screen where you get feedback. If you're too early or too late, you have the opportunity during this game to achieve success based upon your timing. So we like low timing. We like millisecond scores that are very close to that auditory cue. The closer you are to the auditory cue, the more success you have in the game. So this is just a quick demonstration of what the training would look like. But as a practitioner, let's just say I want to add a new session, and maybe this client is ready for a template. Well, through the eClinic, I can choose a pre-written template, and then I can modify that template. So maybe I have a boy that I'm working with, and I want to add some sessions for a boy. It wouldn't be on the same user. We're talking about a new user, and I want to add more games. All I have to do is add sessions from a template that is pre-written. And we, as you can see, we have a lot of sessions that are preloaded. And that is what makes this so perfect for a virtual treatment. I can also send a message to my individual that I'm working with, right? And I can schedule a message like, don't forget to train tomorrow. I can add emojis to that, to that message where, hey, you are so cool. You're doing awesome. And all of these things similar to, maybe the communication that I'm having with a client that's in my clinic or that I want to follow up with some information. All of these things are at my fingertips. I can also, as a practitioner, I can access the training report. Okay. So I can go in and I can look at a graph. And remember, these are demo graphs. This is a demo account. And so the numbers are going to be all over. This is one of my favorite reports to share would be the graph, that shows us the red line would be with those auditory cues. That's a harder task. And the blue line would be you're just tearing an auditory bell, okay? And remember, we're talking about feedback in real time. And so that's why it becomes a little bit more difficult as you train. This is a short test average graph report. This is the same graph that I could look at on the I Am Pro in the clinic. It's just that now it's in the cloud. And so very user-friendly. That doesn't mean it's easy to learn. Some people do have more of a challenge to learn this, but listen, I'm a seasoned therapist, and so I didn't grow up in the technology age. So it's naturally going to be harder for me to grasp the use of a technology in the cloud and how to apply that. Some of my therapists get this way sooner than I ever did, but the concepts remain the same. We want low millisecond scores. We want a reaction that is fast when we hear an auditory cue. And we really want our clients to, in real time, change their motor plan, right? In real. So I'm going to show you now from a client point of view. As a client, an individual that's going to use the IM Home, remember, this is the technology, this little box. This is the magic, and it's plugged into my computer, and so I have an icon on my desktop. When I click on that icon, it allows me to log in. Now I have to be online. I have to have a good Wi-Fi connection in order to pull up the training. So what it did is it's pulling up session number 3, okay? And it's telling me that I have 9 tasks for 16 minutes total, okay? And that's important because some of our individuals want to know how long. I can look at what are the individual tasks that I'm going to do and how long are they, just by clicking on that little arrow, and I can then close that. So again, what I did is I clicked on the arrow by task 5, and it also is giving me an example of what I need to be doing. I can access a video right here that shows me exactly what the motor plan should be. And when I am ready to train, I'm going to turn on my speaker. So I've just attached a speaker and I have my trigger. So I'm going to go ahead and start the exercise. Now, when I'm clapping, it's measuring in milliseconds how close to the bell I am, telling me how many more hits I have. Every time I hit in the middle, which is that green, that's a really low millisecond hit. And, it's that simple, Amy. When I'm done with this task, I can go to my result. I can see how I did. I can continue training, and I can go to the next task. And look, it changed. So every time I go to, and this is something that I, as a practitioner, have set up for my client to do.
So as your client is clapping or tapping their foot or whatever exercise they might be doing, they're hearing that sound. And then I was seeing lights light up. I was seeing yellow, green, red. Can you tell me about those? And what are they looking at on the screen there when they're doing that exercise?
So we talked about feedback, and if I was wearing headphones, I would get feedback in my left ear with a different sound than that cowbell you heard that would tell me you are early on the beat, or in my right ear that would say you are late on the beat. And that way, in real time, I can adjust my motor plan. I can speed up or slow down. Likewise, the visual cues that I have on the screen correlate with those auditory cues. Red means I'm really off the beat. If it's on the left side of my screen, I'm really early. If it's on the right side of the screen, I'm really late. Yellow is I'm closer to the beat, but I'm still not really close to the beat. Again, the left side, I'm early, right side, I'm late. The green is where we want to be because that means I'm really close to the beat. And the practitioner will determine how close to the beat you need to be. Let's just say you need to be within 50 milliseconds, 50 milliseconds, in order to get that green box to illuminate and hear a tone that correlates with that, that's a pleasant tone. And as the practitioner, I am the one that sets up those boundaries for this feedback. So it's great because now I compare visual cues with those auditory.
Right. So their goal is to synchronize. So we're talking a lot about synchronizing, right? So
Yes.
Can you explain what the importance of synchronization is? We're synchronizing with Interactive Metronome and with IM Home. We're synchronizing our motor movements with an auditory beat. Can you talk to us about the importance of that? Why are we even doing this? Why synchronize with the beat?
if you are walking and your brain tells your foot to take a step off the curb, but it doesn't tell you in time. So maybe you're late taking that step off the curb or you're early, you're going to fall because your brain didn't give you that information that's synchronized with your environment, with your motor plan, with what you should be doing. Synchronization in the brain is so very important because we like consistency. The brain likes consistency. It likes predictability, right? And this is why we have some of our clients that maybe don't do hard things. So if reciprocal crawling was too hard, I'm going to go straight to walking because it's only 2 appendages and not 4, right? And so our brain will go, you know what, that's too hard, that's too much work. You failed at that so many times, we're just going to move on. Well, failure teaches us things, but in a developmental spectrum, it's not always good. We need to have our developmental milestones the way that nature intended. And synchronization of our movement should be predictable. If I reach for my cup and I overshoot or undershoot, I'm going to knock it over. If I want to drink out of the straw, there are so many steps that my brain has to tell my body to do. Lip closure, tongue position. My hands have to hold this in the right spot. The straw has to be in the right. It can't be too far back. It can't be too far forward. All of that information has to be synchronized for success in drinking out of that straw. Synchronization is not something that we can isolate in the brain. We can't say, okay, we're just going to work on synchronization with your gait today. Can't do that. You cannot isolate how the brain synchronizes your movement patterns, but you can work on improving the synchronization and improving the movement patterns. This goes, Amy, this goes for your auditory processing skills, your visual processing skills, your perceptual motor, your proprioception, your vestibular integration. That's your movement integration. Do you get dizzy when you move? Are you able to tolerate, having your head go back and forth? All of these things. And we could go on and on, and I would love to go on and on. This is one of my favorite areas to talk about. But as humans, we see those other humans that are not synchronized. And those are the humans that maybe, little humans. Let's talk about children. They fall a lot. They run into things. They look like they've been in a fight and, they're in a good home and there is no abuse going on. These little humans might not be able to tolerate different textures of food because maybe they're still in a suck, swallow, breathe pattern from birth where they were on the bottle and they just can't figure out how to chew or masticate food. That is all synchronization. And so when we say we're not going to create a splinter skill, I'm not going to just teach you how to drink from a straw. I am going to teach your brain to synchronize the responses for your motor, your visual motor, your auditory motor every time consistently. Now we have a much more successful whole person. And we want that. We want a person that has that whole body synchronization and that we don't leave out that executive processing, the sensory motor, all of those things.
I was thinking about the book that when my son was little and he had been diagnosed with sensory processing disorder, one of the first books I got was the book by Carol Stock-Kranowitz, and it's called The Out of Sync Child.
Yes.
And so, we just see when things just aren't going right with development and things, we can oftentimes trace it back to they're out of sync. Their brains are out of sync with their bodies. They're out of sync with their environment. They're out of sync with their siblings, their peers. And so, another nice change that we see with this is social development.
Yes.
So can you tell me just a little bit about that? And then I want to ask you some questions about how do families get started with this?
Yeah. So social skills, that's so important for us as humans. And as we know through the pandemic, our social skills had to change, right? And we were seeing people in one dimension instead of, our three-dimensional, I can hug you, I can touch you. And it had a great effect on a whole generation of teenagers. And we're seeing the effects of that now, where social skills are now a big problem with schools, with peer-to-peer interactions. I heard a statistic the other day, I won't get it right, so I'm just going to give you the gist of it. But we have a generation of our male population ages about 20 to 25 who are so anxious about social interaction that they only interact in this one dimension, and they don't have a peer group that they can get around. And I know firsthand that this can be so detrimental to your mental health. So let's talk about how the brain protects you if you've had trauma, or if you've had a bad experience with a friend. You're going to guard. Your brain is going to say emotionally, we're going to guard you. That means that I'm on alert. And even something like a smell, like a vanilla candle burning that maybe was burning during a traumatic event, or maybe that candle was burning when a friend yelled at me and really hurt my feelings. That vanilla candle can trigger me. And now, if my brain is not synchronizing, it's going to protect me. And I may respond to the people around me very differently than would be socially appropriate. Maybe I push them out of the way. Maybe I yell at them. What I'm doing is I'm protecting me. And socially, that's not acceptable, right? People don't understand that. I think we're getting better as a society to understand neurodivergent populations and the fact that maybe we're not all extroverts. And if we are introverts, we might not want to be with more than one person at a time, right? I can't even tolerate a group of three because my attention and my brain is not going to let me generalize how to respond to more than one person at a time. When we use the interactive metronome and we synchronize the brain, we're not just synchronizing the frontal temporal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, all of it, right? The cerebellum. We're synchronizing all of it together. So we're not isolating, and you're naturally going to have more self-regulation. That self-regulation, when I smell that vanilla candle, now I have agency to say that is just a vanilla candle. That doesn't mean that my friend is going to yell at me. This is a different situation. I don't need to run away. I don't need to and if we're working with clients that have been very hurt, this can take some time because it's not just brain synchronicity, it's trust. And we have to build trust with those that we are going to have in our peer group and that we're going to want to be around. But I think the main thing is that it helps with that brain synchronicity. Brain's not going to automatically go to fight or flight and say, you have to be on your defenses. You cannot, you've got to be ready for anything because this could go south really quickly. We can't predict that. We can't predict that. And to go into every situation defensive, right there, we're not making friends, right? We're probably, dissociating from the group. And that's not real healthy, right, for us or for our peer group.
Right. So before I ask you about how somebody gets going with this, based on what we've talked about so far, it seems like many, many different people could benefit from this technology. So both children and adults. So what are some of the diagnoses or conditions that you think would benefit from the IM Home?
So right now, I'll tell you what the clients that I have using the IM and the IM Home, both in the clinic and at home. I have kids with ADHD. I have an adult with autism, an autistic adult, I believe is how you say that. I have 2 post-concussion adults using this, 2 children from a family who are struggling with their learning. So maybe they don't even have a diagnosis. They're just falling through the cracks at school, but they're not achieving their best. Stroke recovery. I've used this with my own father. I've had geriatric patients in the past, and to be able to use an appendage that has previously had paralysis challenges, this can really help with that. And again, we're talking about motor planning and, the technique and the technicality of when do I reach for something? How do I step? What does that timing look like? So in a nutshell, there's really not a population with diagnostics that I would eliminate from use of IM Home. But as a practitioner, as a therapist, I've been one for over 30 years. I do have to say that I am more careful using this with people that might have a seizure disorder that is not under control. So I know that this is going to give a lot of auditory and visual feedback, and that may precipitate a seizure. We have to be really careful with that. And then anyone that might have an electrical implant in like a pacemaker, because we have to be careful of electric responses and the distance between those electric responses. And so the only other one would be a behavioral health, someone that might have suicidal ideology. I always make sure that they have a support network, that they're not alone, because the work that goes into this program, you can be growing and succeeding, but we just don't know enough about behavioral health at this time, about depression, when it hits, how it hits. And so I'm always careful with that population. But I will tell you that those that I've used this with that have behavioral health challenges have self-reported improvement in their regulation with their mental health.
So if somebody, so tell me from the two different perspectives. So from the perspective of an IM provider, so you have to be an IM provider first, right? To do IM home. So tell me, how does an IM provider who's just doing IM in the clinic right now, how would they get started with Interactive Metronome with doing IM home?
Great question. And what we really encourage our practitioners to do, our certified providers is what we call them. I actually teach a course that gives you all the technical aspects of using this equipment, how you set it up, what you do with a client. So if you're just using it in the clinic and you've got this under your belt, you're comfortable with it, you're confident with it. We also have training for using the eClinic, learning how to do it and how to set up. It's quite simple, to be honest. You're going to, as a practitioner, you're going to create a user. You're just going to do it in the cloud. There's a whole separate website that you log on to create a client and start from the beginning. A little too much technology to go into just chatting about it. But once you are familiar with how to use the IM Pro in the clinic, implementing IM Home is not a big step forward. But what's overwhelming to some of our providers is that I think that we're trying to take too big of a bite. I always recommend learn the basics first, learn the foundation. You crawl before you walk, right? And so do that, be comfortable with that, and maybe find a mentor. I'm so happy with those therapists that have come to me and said, can you kind of help me out with this? And I'm like, absolutely, I'd be happy to mentor you in this. Or, find someone who's done it before if you're, not getting what you need from the webinars that we have. And such an exciting time in Interactive Metronome as well, because, I know that the staff is working really hard to update our education and developing more user-friendly webinars that are bite-sized pieces, right? And so once you are a provider and you have that IM Home, now you are able to sell and implement the IM Home with your clients. Now, the thing you need to understand about the IM Home is it is not durable medical equipment. This is a tool, but durable medical equipment would be something like a splint to support your broken arm, oxygen so that your levels don't fall, a CPAP machine for sleeping. The IM Home is a modality, it's a tool to help with functional improvement, okay? But as a tool, it's not considered durable medical equipment. It does qualify for, I have sold it to parents that have Social Security money. It does qualify for healthcare savings accounts, those tax-free dollars that you set aside at the beginning. And so there are ways around it. And then as a practitioner, I actually have an inventory. I carry an inventory. So if I have a family that cannot afford to pay for the whole unit right now, I can opt to do a payment plan with them. And then I mentioned very briefly, depending on what their insurance is, if they're willing to make a commitment they purchase the equipment, or I put them on a payment plan, and I, can bill their insurance legally in the state of Colorado to do that. And that cost then just, what you're doing is you have to look at, what did I pay for this piece of equipment, and what's the use? I don't know about you, Amy, but I, over the years, have bought so much exercise equipment, it's not even funny. In fact, today I looked over at the corner and saw my $50 yoga mat that's been sitting there all summer because I prefer to hike. And I'm thinking, wow, I paid a lot of money for that yoga mat and I really haven't used it. I've paid a lot of money for memberships at clubs that never went anywhere. And if I added that up over the course of a year, it's probably upwards of $1,200. We're talking a fraction of that for a piece of equipment that you get one-on-one, practitioner oversight with, which you just really can't put a price on that.
Yeah. So if there are families watching and they are interested in this for their child or even for themselves, how do they get started with it? How do they find a provider and get going? Yeah.
So I believe on Interactive Metronome website, you might know more about this than I do, but we do have a locator board where you can find a practitioner within your state or region. Now, not every practitioner will implement the I Am Home because maybe they just have chosen not to do that in their practice. That's okay. That's an option, right? Or you can reach out to Interactive Metronome individually, just call. I have to say that I love the staff at IM. I'm not employed. I'm not an employee of IM, and I have not been paid to say this, but y'all have some of the best staff that really cares about the questions when people call. And I've had referrals from just, if someone calls the Interactive Metronome corporate, which their number is right on the website, and says, we can't find a provider, one of you guys will reach out to me and say, hey, would you take this client on? And, that's easy for me. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. If I've got the time and I have the staff, I'm happy to do that. So hopefully, as the IM technology, the interest in it grows, there will be more practitioners around the world that will have the ability to take on more clients.
Yeah. So if a family is living in a particular area and they can't find an IM home provider in their state, they're not restricted. They can pick an IM home provider from anywhere, basically.
Yes. The only restriction, as we talk about insurance, would be that if you want to use insurance to pay for your sessions with an occupational speech or physical therapist to oversee your IM home use, it generally speaking has to be within your home state. So that practitioner would need to be licensed or certified in that state and be able to be in network with your insurance. So right now I have 3 families in the state of Colorado that have just come on board in the last month, and I'm able to bill insurance for each of the users in that family's home. And like I mentioned, there are some really great YouTube clips out there on the eClinic. I don't believe you can access the eClinic if you are not a certified provider. So step 1, if you're a provider, take that certification course. There's so much information in that course that I think you can apply to what you're already doing.
Yeah, so that is a 2-hour course. It's free of charge, and you find that on our website, interactivemetronome.com. And it is offered for AOTA CEUs and ASHA CEUs. So you can get CEUs to do it too if you're an occupational therapist, occupational therapy assistant, or a speech pathologist. Well, thank you, April. Thank you for letting us flip the script today and have me interview you. It was wonderful to hear how you're incorporating I Am Home in your practice and how it's helping your clients and who all can benefit from this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for giving me your time. And, what a wonderful opportunity we have to expand on this new era of healthcare. So I'm honored, and I just really appreciate your wisdom and your time. Thank you.
Thanks, April.
Thank you for joining me today on A Matter of Time. I welcome your comments and questions on this YouTube channel directly at April at interactivemetronome.com or on the Interactive Metronome website, where you can find additional resources